Once upon a time, there lived a small boy named Elvis. By all accounts, he was a perfectly normal boy, aside from one rather glaring feature that separated him quite considerably from many of his classmates at school. Elvis had been born without a nose. He had been puzzled for many years as to why he looked different from everyone around him, but he was unable to put his finger on it until one evening his mother sat him down and decided to tell him the truth. "Elvis," she said, "I think it's time you learned a few hard-hitting facts about your birth." Elvis looked up inquisitively, paying very close attention to every word that came out of his mother's mouth. She continued, "Elvis, you were born on an ancient Indian burial ground just south of Bournemouth." Elvis became confused. Until now he had never heard of such burial grounds being present in these lands. "But mother," he said questioningly, "are you sure that's accurate?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, my son, I'm afraid it is," she said. "Not only that, but a gypsy's curse was placed upon your forehead at the moment of your arrival on this earth." Elvis became more confused. "But why? Why would a gypsy do such a thing to me?" His mother did not have an answer. It seemed she was hiding something from him. He did not know why she would not disclose the full information available at this time, especially since she seemed to be opening up so fully with him. There must be something truly terrible regarding this gypsy's reasoning for her to not divulge it at this moment. His mother looked down to Elvis and said to him, "The curse placed upon you removed your nose at birth, Elvis. That is why you look different from the other children." Elvis reached up and touched his face with his fingertips, noticing at once that she was right. He did lack a nose, something that had eluded him all these years. He knew now why he was different. "Mother," he inquired, "how may I get a new nose to fill this void in the centre of my face?" His mother shook her head. "There is only one way, but I fear it is far too perilous for one as young as you, Elvis." Elvis stood up, looked her dead in the eye, and demanded information. "Mother," he said sternly, "tell me where I might acquire a nose this instant, or I shall never speak to you again." His mother seemed to accept that she would have to give him the information that he sought. She told him a tale of a great wizard named Nigel, who lived high in the mountains of Tibet. She told him that to acquire a new nose he must travel there, on horseback, across the trees, across the countryside, across the world. And when he arrived, he would be presented with a brand new nose, nostrils included, free of charge. Elvis was delighted. For once in his life, he felt a purpose about himself. He knew that now his quest, once completed, would make him into a normal boy. At last, something that he had yearned for since the day he was born. The next week, Elvis set out. He stole a horse from a nearby stable, unable to afford the journey on his own. After all, he was only being given £2 per week in pocket money. This would scarcely cover a trip to the seaside, let alone the mountains of Tibet. He had trouble encouraging the horse to swim across the ocean. but eventually it did, much to his surprise. As he was partway through the ocean, a strange cloud formation appeared above him, and seemed to form the visage of a goat. He looked up, and the goat smiled down upon him. "You are doing the right thing, Elvis," boomed the goat, a small piece of cloud billowing forth from its mouth. It said nothing more, and the face slowly faded away into a more traditional cloud formation. Elvis became puzzled, but after all the information that he had received recently, he thought nothing more of it. Nothing could shock him, or so he thought. After many months of horses swimming and walking across land, avoiding dangerous situations and animals, he finally reached the mountains of Tibet. But he realized he did not know where to find the Grand Wizard named Nigel, so he decided to ask a local peasant. Thankfully, the peasant was fluent in English. Elvis asked him, "Sir, do you know where I might find Nigel? I believe he's a wizard." The peasant looked back at him. "So, you're after a new nose, are you?" he inquired. "Yes, how did you—" "Oh." He reached up, feeling his nose, and realized that his quest would be obvious for anyone. As he started to ascend the mountains, he came across a cave. In this cave he discovered an ancient tome, which seemed to give some information about the location of Nigel. He had been pointed this way by the peasant. He continued up the mountainside, following a rather cryptic passage from within the tome. There was no traditional map, merely ancient text in a variety of languages which he struggled to decipher. As he reached the top of one mountain, he found a new section of the passage that he was able to translate, realizing that it was another peak that he sought. After several days of similar incidents, he finally reached the top of the mountain he believed to be the home of Nigel the Wizard. He looked out across the valleys and saw a faint plume of smoke. The smoke was purplish in colour, which is why it caught his eye so readily. He started down the mountainside towards it, and at once saw a small figure leaping back and forth around the flames of the fire. Surely this must be the wizard. He wore a long beard on his face that appeared to be false, and a pointed hat sat atop his head, covered in moons and stars. Surely a more obvious wizard was never seen on this planet previously. As he approached Nigel, as he suspected it was him, he decided that he would unload his luggage on the ground next to the campfire before conversing with the wizard. In case he was forced to flee, he would require the extra speed on the horse which would be generated by unloading the excess weight. As he was doing so, the wizard looked round at him. "I am Nigel, the great wizard. You seek me for a new nose, is this true?" Elvis was slightly taken aback, but he confirmed that this was indeed the case, by way of a small nod. "Ah," the wizard said. "Well then, there's only one thing for it." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a bag. Crudely drawn onto the front of the bag was the word "Noses." Underneath, as he wiped away a small amount of dust, it became clear that it said, "All shapes and sizes available." Elvis was thrilled at this turn of events. He stepped forward towards the wizard and asked him what kind of nose would suit him. Nigel reached into the bag and pulled out a rather delicate nose, pressing it into Elvis's face, where his original nose should have been were it not for the gypsy's curse and the ancient Indian burial ground. The nose felt strange on his face, and Elvis reached out to touch it. The sensation was new to him, something he had never felt before, but he at once felt more complete, like a real boy at last. He thought his troubles were over, until Nigel reached up to his neck, tearing back the false beard and revealing himself to be Elvis's mother. Elvis was truly shocked and astounded. He took a step back, almost stumbling on the loose earth. "Mother, what are you doing here? Why are you the Grand Wizard? Why were you wearing a beard?" His mother looked back at him, a cold stare fixed on his new nose. "Elvis," she said, "there is something you must know. The gypsy who placed the curse upon your face and removed your nose, it was me." "But why?" Elvis uttered. "I suppose it is time you learned the truth, young Elvis. I did not think you would make it here. In many ways I prayed you would not, for I did not wish to tell you this final piece of information, which may jeopardize our very relationship as mother and son. You see, Elvis, when I was a little girl, I had no nose." As she began to tell the story, Elvis took a seat on the ground, enthralled and enraptured. She continued, "I had no nose until I was 10 years old, when a Grand Wizard gave me his. But as part of this deal, I would be forced to one day do the same. I would be forced to part with my nose and give it to a small child in need. I would be forced to don this beard, wander about the mountains of Tibet and wait for him. If he did not come, I would be permitted to keep the nose. This is what I secretly longed for. I prayed that you would give up on your quest, but it was foretold that you would make it here. The nose in the bag was not any nose, it was mine." "But you still have a nose, Mother," Elvis spoke up. "I do, but this is not any ordinary nose, Elvis. This is not a physical nose. You see, the ancient Chinese believe that the nose is one's soul. I gave you my soul, Elvis, and for this, I must perish." As Elvis looked on, his mother stepped forward into the fire and began to vanish before his very eyes. Elvis was so shocked. He had no idea what he would do with himself. He was forced to look on as his mother vanished completely. He knew there was only one thing he could do now. He plucked the beard from the earth, placed it on his chin, and waited. He sensed that one day another child would venture to the mountain top and request a nose, and he'd be ready. He would be ready indeed. The end.